I think maybe we'll kick off by going around and having people say a bit about their own view of the role of the media. There'll be time for questions, so if you have questions, please think of them and try and remember them. I just want to stress three things. If you want to get covered by me, the easiest way to do it is to do something wrong and then get caught at it. So, you know, if you're promising to teach people things and you're taking their money and you're not teaching them, that's a good way to get in the newspapers. If you are promising to give people an education and then you're not giving them an education, that's a good way to get in the newspapers. That's the easiest way, but that's just the way newspapers work. It doesn't have anything to do with me or even with the New York Times. The second easiest way is to do something new. And I think here the media has a big role to play in education, because if you do something new and it's something good, and it's something that other people might want to adopt or learn from, well, how are they going to find out about it? And one of the easiest ways for people to find out about it is to hear about it in the media. And so I feel that's a big part of my role, is to be aware of what's happening that's new and that might be useful for people to know about. And then the third part of my role, and this is not something that's dictated by my editors, it's just the way I work, is if I find something that interests me, that I think readers would be interested in just because they're generally curious about the world. So it may not be particularly useful, but it may be interesting. You may be a person with a compelling story. You may be an institution that's trying to do something against great odds. You may be a scholar whose work, although it may not cure cancer or solve global illiteracy, is still something that people can engage with and relate to. And so I see my job as to give a platform to people like that, and to give our readers a window on what's going on in the world that they wouldn't otherwise notice. So I suppose for me that boils down to being skeptical. So, you know, if you claim you're doing something, I want to know that you're doing it, because the reason that people turn to the IHT is because they can believe that what we say is true. That's probably our main selling point, aside from being in English. So my first duty as a journalist is to be skeptical. But my second duty is to be curious. And I think that's my role. Now I realize we're sort of split between, if you want, practicing journalists and editors, or managers rather than editors. So but I thought some of you would at least want to hear from somebody at the street level with a notepad, and that's what causes me to get out my notepad. So, Suneet. I guess what I'm saying is, what do you think our role is? The role of the media, not particularly your own organization, but the larger role.
Well, I must see. Media, firstly, can impact policy. For example, in India, unlike, say, in the Western countries or other developed economies, we do not have universal literacy. The latest census figures of 2011 show 72% literacy. We still do not have full enrollment at the primary level. Dropout rates are still quite high. So, for example, the Right to Education Act, which was passed about a year and a half ago in India, was highlighted in our publications and other publications. The issues which are coming up in terms of the implementation of the Right to Education Act are highlighted by media. For example, one of the provisions of the Right to Education Act is that private schools need to guarantee 1/4 of their seats to underprivileged children. The government will pay their fees, but obviously not at the level which the normal students pay, or from more privileged backgrounds pay. So a lot of schools, private schools, are resisting this. We are highlighting this, highlighting the lacunae in the implementation and the way forward. Similarly, one more example, the Indian government a few years ago reserved 27% of seats in higher education institutions for the so-called other backward castes. The Prime Minister of India also made the commitment that the seats in the general category would not change. Now, what that means is that you need more seats in institutions, which cannot happen overnight. The Times of India, along with other media institutes, highlighted this, and so the government changed its policy and implemented this in a staggered way over 3 years. So this is just one example in which media can influence policy.
Luke.
I believe we have 3 different goals, 3 different directions as a journalist and as an editor for Le Monde. The first one is quite obvious. I would say news, news, and news. As a journalist, I think we have to give the informations about education policies, educational debates, and this kind of general interest subjects. It is the first point. I will give you one example. As you probably know, in France we'll have presidential elections next year during in April, and education will be one of the most important subjects because, as I said at the beginning of our session, it is a subject of interest for both teachers, parents, students, and our goal in the electoral campaign is to inform the debate and is to decode the programs of the candidates, for example. And we have several questions we have to be very cautious with. For example, do we have to increase students' fees, for example, which is a very important question. Should we increase the number of public service teachers, for example, which is a current subject of debates in France. So the first main goal is news, and as you said, we have to be skeptical and curious on this subject. Our second mission is different. As a national media, we have to offer the best services to our customers, and I think education is from rankings, for example, to personal and private services or coaching, for example. I think that we can offer some help to different people. And I read a portrait of the global editor of the New York Times last week in the New Yorker, and she had a sentence, and she said, "We are not only a newspaper," and she was talking about the New York Times, of course, but I think she's right. And Le Monde is not only a newspaper. And during the next year, we're trying to implement services around educational issues. The third mission, I would say, is trying to offer teaching and learning material. And as Wikipedia did in the last years, I think that newspapers, medias, you talked about your program for television, we can provide some contents for students, for example. And in the next months, we'll try to develop offers in direction to students to help them to progress for their formation. So if I sum up, I would say news is a main goal for journalists, of course, but services and teaching and learning materials are second but very important missions.
Okay, so we offer news, we offer to keep you informed, but we also help you to learn explicitly. You have a much bigger reach than all of the rest of us at this table put together, Philippe. So do you want to say a bit about how Euronews feels it engages with the larger society?
Yes, I would say, since we are not a national channel, a national newspaper like Times of India or Le Monde, who are influential in their own country for policymakers, we don't pretend to influence policymakers because we have an international reach, and even if we have a European origin, we don't pretend to influence politicians themselves. We try rather to create some community which is in line with Euronews as a general editorial line. And maybe we try, like you mentioned you do, maybe coming to your second point, to try to find original experiences around the world, to try to, so we send journalists to Africa, to South America, to India, and we try to identify original experiences which can be of value for other regions of the world. And so, first of all, it can cover very diversified geographic areas, very diversified thematics. For instance, recently we did something about education to peacemaking, learning with animals, single-sex education, economic crisis and education, so a very large range of thematics. And by making it available to the entire world through our network, we try to create a community. And I would like to say that there is a mutual benefit in using satellite television and social networks. We have opened a Facebook account, we have opened a Twitter account, and so we have a journalist who is around, Mrs. Maha Barabas, who is doing it from here, from Qatar, and she is animating this network. And so people from the entire world can watch the program and can send their comments on Facebook or Twitter, and we have our journalists moderating the debate between all the people. So we are creating a community which starts to be very active, and in addition of that, we are very proud because we learned that some universities in the US, in Europe, are using our programs in their own courses, so which is also a very significant sign of success for our program.
Thank you.